Welcome friends. Today we are going to discuss about the draft GST law which was put in the public domain by few of the prominent tax websites. Let us go through and understand what is the GST law. The copy of the GST law which is put in the public domain is a detailed one. GST law is a 128-page document. There are 14 different parts in which the entire sections are divided. Though if you compare the GST law with the current excise, service tax and VAT provisions, you will realize that the GST law is a better and much abridged version of the current excise, service tax and VAT laws. Let us understand the draft GST law in detail in this episode. GST will be applicable on supply made for a consideration. The term supply is elaborated in the GST law. The term supply is said to include all the lease, barter, sale, transfer and also importation of services. Though one can say in the 122nd Constitutional Amendment Bill, the term supply was not elaborated or discussed in detail, the GST law now elaborates and discusses in detail what is the meaning of the term supply. Another important aspect is that typically GST would be applicable when the supply is made against a consideration. The GST law also elaborates that GST would be applicable for certain transactions which are made even without consideration. And the GST law specifies that there are 5 transactions which will attract GST even when these supplies are made without a consideration. One of the prominent example being self-supply of goods or services. So when a self-supply of goods or services is made even without a consideration, GST will be applicable. Currently, as you would be aware, state VAT is not applicable on barter of goods. In GST regime, such kind of barter of goods transaction will also attract GST. The draft GST law provides that GST would be applicable on transaction value. The transaction value is said to include the price which is paid or payable for goods between unknown parties or unrelated parties. The GST law also specifies that in case a supplier receives certain subsidies in connection with supply, such kind of subsidies would also be includable in the transaction value which will be subject to GST. As regards discount, the GST law provides that discounts would typically be excludable if they are provided at the time of supply of goods or before the supply is made. In case the discount or incentive is given after the supply is made, such discounts or incentive would not be deductible from the transaction value. The GST law also provides for valuation mechanism by way of GST determination of value rules. If one refers to this GST determination of value rules, you will realize these rules are drafted by taking a cue from the current excise, service tax and even the customs valuation rules. So in days to come, it would be a big challenge for the assessee to go through and understand the GST determination of value rules in detail. The liability to pay GST will arise as per the time of supply as specified in the draft GST law. The draft GST law specifies separate time of supply for goods and services. For goods, the time of supply would be earliest of removal of goods, raising of invoice, receipt of consideration or the time when your buyer is recording receipt of goods. As far as services are concerned, the time of supply would be earliest of raising of invoice, receipt of consideration or the time when your supplier is showing receipt of services. So it can be seen that there are different parameters and the liability to pay GST will arise at the earliest of these 4 or 5 parameters. So it would be a big challenge for the corporate houses to maintain a reconciliation of payment of GST as per the parameter which govern time of supply. In GST regime, all the assessees would be required to determine the place of supply. The draft GST law provides for determination of supply for goods and services. The provisions are separate for goods as well as services. For goods, Typically, the place of supply would be the location where the goods are delivered, whereas for services, typically the location of service would be the place of your service recipient. However, the draft GST law provides for certain exceptions wherein the specific rule will override the general provision for determination of place of supply.